Welcome to Founders Club, the show for real estate entrepreneurs. All right, Whitney, thank you so much for being on today. Very excited to have you on and discuss some of the things that you're doing around passive investing. I know you've made a career out of that. You have ownership in over 5,000 multifamily and residential units. You have ownership in over 1,200 storage units, and just really excited to have a great conversation about building wealth in real estate. And so again, thanks for coming on and welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me on the show. And it's going to be fun. I hope we can provide some, immense value here.
Absolutely. So everything, I like to kind of start with just how everybody got into the game of the real estate, because I think there's a lot of, different ways people come in, different backgrounds. And so why don't we just start with how you got in the game of real estate to start with?
Absolutely. It was completely by accident. I wish I could say I went to school for this, but after 22, 23 years of investing in real estate, I have over 800 million in partnership. I founded my company, ashwealth.com. I'm the director of investor education at passiveinvesting.com. But I actually started off in school completely as in public health, actually. And when I bought my first property in 2002, I bought it with a significant other. About a month later, the relationship fell apart and I had the house. It wasn't a divorce. I just broke up with my boyfriend, but we did things a little out of order there, a little uncharacteristic, and had the house. Everything was under my name. And I honestly thought the whole thing was going to sink me financially. So I stuffed it full of roommates. Now, keep in mind, this house was straight out of the 1960s, psychedelic daisies painted on the walls, green shag carpet. And I did not have the skills to do this. I was a numbers person. I crunched numbers. I was an epidemiologist. I didn't, know how to do drywall or plumbing or anything like that. YouTube didn't exist back then. So I went to Home Depot and bought the book, Home Depot 123, and paying my friends in sushi, beer, and pizza, we put the house back together and sold it 11 months later for a profit, more than I was making in my day job that had me traveling almost 80 hours a week sometimes. And I was like, wait a second, this is amazing. Like, I need to do more of this. It was my first foray to learning that my value in the world was unhooked from how much time I spent, right? So I wasn't necessarily trading time for dollars. Did several more live and flips and house hacks like that. Eventually with my now husband, and we did several projects together and got really good at building equity, really bad at building cash flow. So we were puzzled on how people could actually retire off of things like this. And then a friend of ours said one day, well, hey, why don't you keep one of those flips that you do and put a renter in it? And we were kind of like, oh, that's so simple genius here. Yeah, so we should do that. So scaled a portfolio of over 36 single family rental properties, jumped into a 52 unit apartment building in partnership, and then hit several inflection points on the way. But one of the biggest ones is that we had a baby girl and I wanted to spend more time with her. And managing the properties, managing my full-time job there wasn't enough time to do that. So I was like, we got to go bigger, faster. And so do we go into larger institutional projects? Or do we learn how to invest passively in other people's projects? And I decided I was going to do both, see which one wins. And I'm super glad that I did both. But I think a lot of realtors here could probably identify with that, is that you're building your business, you're building your brokerage, but at the same time, you got to have the income coming in on the back end. Especially if you want to retire one day and, have your time back. How can you do that? And so really, it's the passive property that has unlocked that financial freedom for ourselves. It really given us the time freedom, that freedom of choice. And we have currently 6,500 units under residential units, 2,200 self-storage, 15 express car washes, and a few other business assets as well.
Wow. Very cool. So it all went back down to that first property that you bought with your boyfriend. Then you remodeled everything yourself, kind of self-taught through Home Depot. What did you buy that original deal for?
Bought it for $171,000.
And then after all the rehab and everything, what did you end up selling it for?
So keep in mind that this is in the wild, wild west of lending. So I was 103% financed on this deal. I actually borrowed $7,000 from my grandfather. And my grandfather must have really loved me because he cashed out, I'm sure, a 10, 12, 15% CD that he was earning in the bank and lent me the money. I agreed to pay him back with interest. But of course, he couldn't reinvest it in a CD with that same interest. But he lent me $7,000, and I immediately went and got a second loan on the property, or a HELOC. Pulled all that cash back out, paid him back. So he was paid back in 30 days. Put $8,000 into the property, and then sold it 11 months later for just under $239,000.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
So saw a little profit on your first deal. Then you're well on your way. And so then it sounds like you kind of got the bug after that. And then did you stick to the real, just basically like flipping? Was the model at the beginning?
I didn't know that I actually qualified as a real estate investor. I had no idea. Like, I was just living in a house. And honestly, when I sold that first property and I got the check, and my first, reaction was like relief. I'm like, oh, I'm not attached to this property anymore. I don't have the bills. I don't have the expenses. I have $52,000. Let me go move to the mountains where I really wanted to be, and buy what I thought was going to be the home of my dreams there. And then when I'm, a couple months later, I'm pulling things together for taxes, and I started calculating everything. I hadn't been paying for principal, interest, taxes, and insurance. Hadn't been paying for any of the utilities. I'm like, wait a second. Okay. I was able to trade up into the next property. Okay. Keeping that money tax-free through the 121 exclusion. And we can talk more about what that is. It's kind of like 1031 for, regular homeowners. And then I was putting money in my pocket every month. Okay. So I was cash flowing there. And then I had a chunk of change, to do with what I wanted on the side. And that's really where kind of everything, took off for me. The next property, I didn't buy with the lens of it being an investment property, but when I quickly realized, hey, this is what I need to do in order to keep my expenses at bay, I stuffed that property full of roommates too, figured out how to rent the driveway, all different things. I was looking to cash flow that property. And so got really good at doing these type of flips, but I just didn't have the terminology cash flow and in my vocabulary to really fully understand if I want true time freedom, I need to learn how to create that cash flow that comes in like monthly clockwork through real estate.
Love that. Yeah, at the end of the day, the cash flow is the name of the game. So it sounds like you started transitioning. You maybe had the aha moment that I should keep every, third or fifth flip that we do, we should keep for ourselves. And then how long did you do that before you started going into what sounds like either like funds or syndications, or where did you go from there?
Yeah, so actually I spent the first 12 years doing fix and flips and living in them and trading up, or sharing with roommates. Oftentimes we would live in and we bring in roommates too, even as a married couple. And so did that for about 12 years, pencil it out, maybe plus or minus a year, and then decided, oh, we need to have the cash flow. And even in our first purposely purchased rental property, I didn't even understand cash flow. Like, I bought the property, it was here in Colorado, right in our backyard, and I was making, with an $80,000 investment, $400 a month. I was like, wait, hold on. I'm just one toilet break away from this thing being negative. I'm like, this isn't true cash flow, but it got me into that side of the game. We took, after that first investment here in Colorado, we decided that we need to live where we want, invest where it makes sense. So we bought 36 units out of market. The first 10 were turnkey. And then we were running out of capital. And I was like, hey, I went to my property manager. I'm like, would you teach me how to do what you do? And BRRRR a property, buy, rehab, rent, refinance, repeat. And he was like, yeah, no problem. I mean, this is back in 2017. It's like shooting fish in a barrel. There was so much property around. And so he connected me, plugged me into his resources. I learned really fast on the first property or two. And then so the next 26 were BRRRR properties. And then we had a lot of cash flow. Everything was cash flowing at 1.5% monthly. And so we were just bringing that all back in together. We had a lot of cash flow. We were refinancing out properties as quickly as we could to recapture our equity. And I was like, I need a place to put this. So we invested in initially 2 syndications. And I knew I wanted to continue to work on property actively. I wanted to buy and manage the manager. But these 2 syndications are going on in the background. And then when we decided to purchase, go into partnership on the 52 unit building, which by the way, didn't go as well as planned. We made money, but it was a terrible amount of headaches for the 18 months that we owned it. A lot of lessons and learning there. My husband, I was like, okay, I think I got it figured out. Like we need to go into partnership on institutional grade assets. And so I was actually on the GP side of things, the general partner side of things. And I'm like, and at the same time, look at what these things are doing. These syndications are doing over here. Like whatever we have coming back in, we should put in syndications as well, just to keep our capital active. Also, it helped us diversify, right? We were really good at single family, small multifamily, mid-sized multifamily. I did not have the capacity to learn about self-storage or mobile home parks or express car washes. Nor the desire, honestly. I mean, I wanted to understand it at like a 30,000, 20,000 foot view level, but I didn't want to be the operator of any of that. That just, it was like hot hookers in the fingernails. I'm like, I'm already so focused over here. I don't want to be a jack of all trades. And so that's when, the passive investments, the syndications, into these other asset classes really allowed us to create diversity in our portfolio, diversity of operator, diversity of market, and just diversity asset class and deal.
Yeah, I love that. And how are you vetting these deals? Because I know that, I agree that syndications can be a great way to just kind of get, passive income coming in. The challenge is, especially over the last, say, 5 to 7 years, there's been a lot of people that raised a lot of money that didn't necessarily have the experience or the track record to be doing the types of deals they were attempting. So how are you like vetting these deals?
Yeah. So there's a lot that goes into due diligence. And so you can make it fairly complicated if you want, but to stick at a high level with some general rules, just think about this. As a passive investor, you get to, once you set your goals, understand your risks that you're willing to take in an investment in your timeline. Okay, that's essentially setting up your investment thesis. You get to control 3 things with the investment. You get to control who you work with, where you invest, and what kind of deal you go into. So, the biggest thing is, switching the mindset. A lot of people come from, and I maybe not so much, your listener base, but if somebody's coming from stocks, bonds, and mutual fund, you're generally chasing returns. We have to ditch that mindset when it comes to real estate. And that's where a lot of investors actually get themselves in trouble. They can get connected. They get starry-eyed by a return that's printed on paper or even digitally on a PDF, and not really thinking through, can that operator, can the who actually do what they say? And so that is where, learning how to vet the operator is super important. We want to make sure that we're investing with people who have strong backgrounds, track records, people that actually have done real estate before. I have choices as an investor. I want to be with a team that has already invested in real estate and built that track record. I don't necessarily have to go with somebody who's just starting out. Now, no knock to anybody that's starting out, but if you're starting your own syndication business, bring somebody on, bring on a partner that has that track record and expertise in what you're trying to do. Okay,
Yeah,
because you can
absolutely.
build that way. Um, what's their investment strategy? Is there just one partner? For me, I no longer invest in deals when there's just one partner. Okay. I want to see at least two partners unrelated as well. That's another way to kind of keep your um, investment, somewhat sound, when you're vetting the operator. Then I want to, understand, what kind of team do they have underneath them? How are they able to find deals, execute on the asset management, manage the deal day to day? What's their legal look like? What's their accounting look like? And if they're just one or two people trying to do it all, that's generally kind of impossible if they're not in it full time. Okay. I want to see a team built out underneath them, and I want to see them full time in their business.
Yeah.
Then there's a
Full time
few,
and a strong team.
absolutely. And I want to see them investing alongside of me into the asset above and beyond their acquisition fee. So a lot of new syndicators, they take their acquisition fee and that's what they put back into the asset. But if you think about it, they really have none of their personal funds into the asset.
Yeah.
So, usually that acquisition fee is 2 to 3%. I want to see an operator invested 5, 7, 10% of the limited partnership.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really good tip because then they have skin in the game and it just seems a little more concrete. And then like I said, this is a great way to generate passive income is through these syndications. The challenging part is they don't just like advertise these, like they're generally not hard, they're not easy to find. So what do you recommend for finding opportunities to participate in these types of deals?
Well, so we want to first understand what kind of investor you are as the listener here, but like, are you what we call an accredited investor, or are you what we call a sophisticated investor? And these aren't our rules; these are the Security and Exchange Commission rules. So we can touch on what that rule is. But if you are an accredited investor, you're going to be able to kind of Google and see operators and see these deals. Now, I'm not saying that's good or bad. Like, that just means you need to do a whole lot more due diligence. You're going to be able to find more deals to look at. But as this, for operators that work solely with sophisticated investors, they can't advertise. They can
Mm.
advertise their business, but they can't advertise a deal. So that seems a little disconnected for those type of investors. So how do you suss this out? Well, number one, I would suggest getting to know other investors that are doing the exact same thing that you want to do, because that is going to be the strongest, kind of relationship that can be built. Now, even then, investors, if they're already invested in a deal, might get incentivized from their operator to connect you as a referral. You're going to want to figure that relationship out as well. Um, so get connected with other investors.
Yeah.
There's investing groups out there like Left Field Investors, Boulder Investment Group, Long Eagle, Crowd DD, that's another one. Investor groups can be somewhat powerful, at least from a networking perspective, but also
Mhm.
watch out from investor groups. They often take advertising dollars from operators. And so you, again, need to have really strong skills at vetting operators and deals on your own. You need to build that skill set. Going to conferences, high level conferences, that's another way to find great operators and connect with other
That's
investors as
probably the
well.
best way to do it in all reality. Yeah.
So, well, even then, at a conference, you're being connected with somebody that has a marketing budget. Now, that again, that can be good or bad, right? You need to be able to see past that marketing piece and really look at the operator, and know, love, and trust them, and also understand their deals in the asset class and make sure that's something you want to be invested in. And then the lowest hanging fruit, simple Google search, which I honestly am not a super fan of.
Yeah, yeah, it's always best to get the direct connection. Events are huge, big communities. Like I know you're part of Bigger Pockets. That's a great community for investing. And then just even like local meetup groups, different things like that. But you got to get out there and that's the way you'll find those types of deals. And one thing I like what you said there was, knowing the type of investor you are. And I know that, you're really big on planning things out and kind of building for the future. And one thing from the book that you talk about is kind of building the foundation for wealth. So maybe you can break that down for us a little bit, and then we'll talk about how to stack the wealth on top of it.
Yeah, definitely. Well, so the book that we're talking about is Money for Tomorrow: How to Build and Protect Generational Wealth. It just released with biggerpockets.com and also on Amazon. And so you can check that out. Essentially, this book is the roadmap that I wish I had as an investor. So I'm taking all my lessons and learning, thousands of hours of podcasts, books, blogs, work with mentors, work with coaches, and distilling it down into a roadmap. And essentially, this roadmap is something that I wrote for my daughter because I want her to be able to steward what we are hopefully leaving to her in the future. But it's also a very cool tool for new investors, right? To build your foundation correctly before you get into your first investment so you can go into it with confidence. Or as a seasoned investor, maybe you've already done a few deals and you already know, a ton about investing. Do you have all of the nuts and bolts in place? Because here's the crux is that most people get really great. Most investors get really good at creating wealth and growing it. They do. That's one skill set, actually two different skill sets. They lack the skill sets to keep the wealth and to pass it on. And unfortunately, you don't really realize how much you lose in those two areas until you get to the quote unquote finish line. Right. And just, I'll answer your question here in a second, like what that foundation is, but just a quick, scenario, just even in my family. And, I don't come from a wealthy background, but across 5 estates in my family, and guys, just because it says estate doesn't mean there's actually money there. There was over $700,000 lost. And you compound out that loss at 7% for 30 years. Take a guess, Oliver, how much money that is.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's going to be in the millions.
Millions.
Yeah.
Okay, and you don't have to lose $700,000 to lose millions of dollars. It can be as simple as like one person deciding, they're going to send their kids through probate because they think they have a simple estate, and they lose like $10,000 or $15,000 through probate. That can be like, at least an easy million to the next generation. We just don't think through these things. So let's back it up to that foundation. We got to start somewhere. And, that foundation, past understanding how you're going to create wealth and move it from active income into passive income, start getting those assets that kick off that income. We got to be able to like build that moat, that foundation that's going to not only protect you, like if you think about a moat built around a castle, as a defense in medieval times, it also is a great way. If you've got a good defense, you can put together a very strong offense. Okay. And that's kind of the time we're in right now is those people who have an amazing defense, they're able to invest. They have funds sitting on the sideline to do that. So first thing, make sure that you can weather the storm, that you've got 3, 6, 9, 12 months of reserves set aside, not only for you personally, but for your assets. And, somebody might go, well, Whitney, is it 3? Is it 6? Is it 12? Like, that seems a little absurd. Okay. It's what you have to look at what your personal situation is. And I call it the sleep well at night factor. For me, I went 9 to 12 months. I want to not worry. Like I have enough stress. I have an 11-year-old. Like I've got enough stress in my life. I don't need to worry about like, is it going to be like if a property is 100% vacant, or if I have a short-term rental that's not renting for 3 months, like I don't need to worry about that. I have reserves in place for that. Then I also want to be able to float my lifestyle too, right? Because I don't want to, if I hit a rough patch, I want to be able to like know that I can have a little bit of fun, right? Like, are we setting aside, just a teeny little sliver, like maybe 3% of your total gross revenue towards having fun, building, if it's in your business, reinvesting back into the business. And
Hmm.
then your war chest of money. And this is where a lot of people are saying, okay, save 20% annually. Okay, great. Fine. But it's more about, is that money liquid enough to where you can deploy that capital in a down market? If it's locked up in your 401k, maybe not. Right. So we want to have a war chest of funds that if I'm sitting here, I was actually just on the call with a coaching client before this, and she's, got a line on a distressed property. And, it was just like, okay, let's go pounce. Like, this property, the seller's going to have to drop it 75K probably to get it sold, because they can't get anybody enticed to buy it. Like, great. You've got your war chest of funds. Let's go after it. Right. We want to be able to do that.
Nice. So I like that. I like that for the foundation. And then let's talk about the wealth formula on top of that to start building. And like you said, building for the future and then building to one day pass it on.
Yeah. Well, we'll kind of stick a pin in how to keep it because there's 6 different ways on how to do that. And that would probably be a great way for us to wrap up because everybody should be doing those 6 things. But, one thing, the biggest thing that I like, educating limited partners on or people that are going to invest passively is once you got your goals, your risk and timeline set is now take a look at your assets, your current assets and the assets you want to go into. What pillars of wealth do they tap into? So, do they preserve capital, create cash flow, build equity, create tax benefits? This is why I love multifamily and self-storage and express car washes so much.
Hmm.
If they abide by those 4 core tenets, those assets provide that. Like if you're investing in stocks, bonds, and mutual fund, Bitcoin, like we've seen over the past like 12 months that actually does not hold true. Like that's why there's an immense amount of volatility there. Also,
Yeah.
if you cut out one of those wealth pillars, you have to be a super sharp investor to really know when's the right time to buy, when's the right time to offload. But if the
Mm.
more wealth pillars you can have per asset, you're going to get paid in that market, whether it goes up, down, or sideways on you. And then so of the 7 pillars, we talked about 4 very briefly, but the other 3 are using leverage wisely, investing in assets that are inflation hedging, keep,
Mhm.
pace with inflation because not every asset does. And then also if you're investing, you got to invest with experts. And either you need to be the expert or you got to invest with an expert.
Yeah, I like that. Very cool. Um, so in terms of, putting deals together, one thing that we talked about at the beginning is just how we as realtors and real estate professionals should be looking at, the business in terms of our day-to-day business of selling and or flipping, and then versus what we're doing on the passive side. How do you coach people through that?
Well, it's similar to somebody who has a W-2 job. You're trying to do, the whole point of the game is, rule number 1, right? Let's just back it up. If wealth creation were a game, you need to know the objective, the rules, and the strategies. Okay. So many people get enticed by the tactic. Do I flip houses? Do I do short-term rentals? Do I do midterm rentals? Like those are all tactics. We need to understand the rules and the strategies. So rule number 1, create wealth. Okay. If you are a realtor, the way you create wealth, generational wealth, and which is to do what you want, when you want, with whom you want, pass that on to the next generation, you need to unhook your time from dollars. Now, being a realtor is highly leveraged. You're hopefully a very high paid individual, but you still need to take some of those chips from your active income off the table and put it into an investment that just makes money while you sleep. Doesn't
Hmm.
matter. It's on autopilot. It doesn't mean you're checking in on it and managing it. It doesn't mean that you're flipping it. It just means it makes money while you sleep. Okay. So and also that can be a great way to build kind of your retirement plan. When we go into retirement, we need cash flow. We need lots of cash flow, right? So flipping is fantastic, but fast forward that to, like, you want to retire in your 50s. Do you want to be flipping in your 50s? I know actually very few people that should be doing that, and even fewer people that actually love doing that. So that's kind of, the principle that we want to, abide by here is understanding how to take your active income and turn it into residual income as quickly as possible. Now, it's really one of the pushbacks I get from investors and, even realtors is like, I've got so many investments that I can do. Like, if I take chips off the table, it means I can't go buy the next property. I'm like, you just got to take a little bit off the table, 20K, 50K here, right? Make some of those investments, start creating those streams of income in the background. And once that flywheel starts spinning, now you've got more cash. You got a whole other business that's running without you. You can take that cash and dump it back into the active side of your real estate.
And in terms of like percentages, do you have any targets that you recommend, or is it kind of case by case depending on where people are at in their business cycle?
As far as like allocation or anything like that,
Yeah.
it is so interesting that you bring that up, because I actually did a research project for myself a couple years ago, and I started talking to all these, well-known passive investors, super well-known names. And I said, what's the perfect allocation between stocks, bonds, real estate, other types of asset classes? And they all laughed, not at me, but they all laughed. And they're like, you have to look at what the market's giving you. And so you can have a thought of an ideal allocation, but it will never be 100% on. So you have to look at what the market's giving you. For me, I'm with my goals, risk, and timeline, I'm okay taking a 50 to 70% position in real estate. I get it. I know it. I love it. I trust it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Somebody else might not be willing to do that. They might want to have 40 to 50K in their own brokerage business, and then have like a 30K in passive real estate and 20K in, paper assets like the stock market. So that boils back down to that investment thesis. Now I will end on this. Real estate has made more ordinary people millionaires and billionaires historically over stocks, bonds, and mutual funds.
Yeah, that's true. And we have an advantage because we're in the business, right? Like, you're closer to the deals, you're closer to the action, you speak the language, it's just you're going to find opportunities. I just had a friend of mine who went on a listing appointment a few weeks back for a 3-unit building, great location here in San Diego. And it was just an older couple, and he was really just, they were looking to just get rid of it. They didn't want to do any work. I mean, the story. They just want to sell it. And he was like, and they told him the price he wanted, and he felt that was low, and he said he could get them more, but they were just like, we don't care. We're done with it. We just want to move on. And he said, okay, great. Can I buy it at that price? And they were like, yes. And then it was, and then he ended up getting a really great deal. And so I think, to your point, just making sure you're positioned to take advantage of those opportunities, and just being in the business, the opportunities will come.
Well, and to stack one other thing on top of there, that realtor just saved themselves a commission, which is usually charged to the deal. And so that's one of the ways that you can keep your wealth is, reducing how many fees you pay. Now, for ordinary people,